ABC's Devin Dwyer travels to Montana for a closer look in tonight's Prime Focus.
Later, and I love to fly fish. It's peaceful, it's calm. Just you and the water.
So yeah, it's 10 and 2. Respecting the land and the wildlife whose habitat that you are entering and then taking something from. Now I just need to catch the 30-inch that's in here somewhere. That's been really ingrained in both of us from a very early stage.
For Lander and Badge Bussey, the Montana wilderness is more than a teenage playground.
It's a feeling that can't be recreated.
The river is their culture. The forest on the doorstep of Glacier National Park is their home.
Do you consider yourself environmentalists?
Environmentalist is a very, stigmatized word. We're just normal Montana kids. We're Montanans first. And although a lot of what we practice and preach are very rooted in what some might call, environmentalist values, that's just how all of us have been living our whole lives.
By any measure, the brothers have become warriors against climate change.
Got the smoke back there, too.
Troubled by extreme seasonal drought, epic springtime floods, and destructive summer wildfires across Big Sky country.
Nothing's improving at all. It's getting worse. The smoke is getting worse.
We call it 5th season of the year. Fire season's 5th season.
In 2015, a blaze tore through the beloved wilderness area Badge Bussey was named after.
I went back in there with my dad a few years ago on horseback, and it was pretty just terrifying seeing just charred land pretty much everywhere.
You said during the trial, I think, that it felt like you had lost part of yourself.
Yes, 100%.
We've seen just in our own lives, particularly in the last 5 or 6 years, just kind of this infiltration of climate change and its effects into our own lives that we didn't ask for.
Still not old enough to vote, the Bussey brothers 3 years ago joined 14 other young Montanans in a landmark lawsuit against their state, alleging its promotion of fossil fuels is contributing to climate impacts that harm them. Both boys took the stand to testify publicly during a 7-day trial, and in August, when State Judge Kathy Seeley handed down her decision, they won.
Is it sunk in that you guys made history?
It really feels like the ball's starting to roll now. There was a lot of skepticism about how much progress something like this would even have in a place like Montana where fossil fuels dominate.
Montana's Constitution declares all residents have a right to a clean and healthful environment, one of just a handful of states with explicit protections for the environment in the state's Bill of Rights.
We're very lucky to have that, and it's just, it hasn't been provided, and finally it's going to be, and I think it's huge that she finally declared it.
The judge's 100-page decision says Montana officials cannot ignore the impact of greenhouse gas emissions and still comply with the Constitution when evaluating permits for new energy projects across the state.
It was a big deal.
Roger Sullivan represented the kid plaintiffs at trial.
We will see a difference on the ground in terms of permitting decisions and in terms ultimately of the amount of CO2 that's being discharged into our atmosphere. That will have real-life consequences in Montana, in the United States, and in the world.
Lander's got a deer just right up there.
The Bussey brothers say their victory also gives momentum to efforts in other states to amend their constitutions to be like Montana's. It's also lifting the spirits of young people like Layla Hassanzada of Virginia and Isaac Vergun of Oregon, leading similar lawsuits against their governments over the climate crisis.
What was your reaction when you got the news that those 16 kids in Montana won their case against the state?
Seeing such a landmark case kind of produce such an awesome result was really inspiring.
You're suing the federal government over climate change. Why?
Pretty plain and simple. The federal government has knowingly known about this issue with climate change and has only exacerbated the problem. It's only going to create solutions. It's only going to move us forward.
Governments have long rejected the idea that they bear legal liability for climate change impacts. Montana called the August ruling absurd and a publicity stunt, saying that Montanans can't be blamed for changing the climate.
We'll continue to permit protectively.
Chris Dorrington is director of Montana's Department of Environmental Quality, the agency responsible for environmental impact studies for proposed oil, gas, and coal projects. He says there's a good reason greenhouse gas emissions have never been part of their assessments.
the state legislature and U.S. Congress have not said affirmatively, you shall go this way with climate analysis.
But will you now, because of this decision, have to look at those things?
There's permits that have standards that are well vetted through the course of time and through really integrated stakeholder involvement of all sorts. We will permit according to those standards.
But you don't want to take a position on whether it should be included in your analysis for a permit, for example?
At this time, because we're in the case, I'd rather not address all of the outcomes that could prevent it.
Lander and Badge Busse say that acknowledgement by a top state official is a major turning point after years of climate denial at the highest levels. Their court victory is also a validation of scientific evidence that climate change is real and that state policies are making it worse. The judge's decision declared Montana a major emitter of greenhouse gas emissions, noting there's still a significant quantity of fossil fuels yet to be extracted. The oil and gas and coal extracted in Montana led to the release of nearly 70 million tons of earth-warming CO2 in 2019.
We can't just turn off the coal-fired generation. We can't just shut down the coal mines. We can't just shut down the oil and gas production. We can't just shut down the refineries. It'll put us into a tremendous economic downturn.
Alan Olson, executive director of the Montana Petroleum Association, says the state's energy industry is not going anywhere.
Does the decision mean that new permits for energy products could be denied or held up in some way?
I don't see them being denied or held up at the permitting level, but I do see that as a possibility through litigation in the courts.
The fuel is still going to be pumped, the coal is still going to be mined.
The coal's still going to be mined, we're still going to produce oil and gas, but like I said, it's going to give them a little more impetus to start filing more lawsuits.
As historic as it may be, the court's decision stops short of ordering the state to cut support for the energy industry or take steps to remedy the impacts from fossil fuel emissions.
This gives legal foundation to putting CO2 and greenhouse gases in the mix of analyzing any of these permits.
Nobel laureate climate scientist Dr. Stephen Running, who testified against the state, says the legal victory is still a sea change.
A big validation for the science.
Oh, yeah. And particularly, it's a validation that none of the old climate denier stuff from 10 years ago was even put forward. I see this trial as a big step in giving people hope that we're starting to pay attention, the big global week.
Look at all these heads.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The Busse family is embracing that hope.
Do you have flies?
But as the state begins its appeal of their case, the brothers say they're still grappling with the costs.
When I go back to school, I will probably be in a little tight situation.
What do you mean?
Just people at my school not genuinely believing in climate change. I'll probably be put in like a little box. I probably won't have that many friends this year.
You think people will isolate you because
yes.
of your participation?
What's happened before.
Are you done with all this, Lander?
Mom Sarah Busse says she and her husband Ryan, who's running for governor,
I feel like Kim Kardashian.
see in the entire experience,
Well, you don't look like her, honey.
a lesson.
We have to be willing to change. And I mean, if we can't learn that from our kids, you know, I don't know who we can learn it from. And I can't believe that we as adults are having to learn this from our kids, right? The kids have become the adults in the room.
From their backyard to the boundaries of the wild. A fight against climate change finding success in a courtroom.
Not only is this a big deal for establishing our rights, but it's a big deal for establishing climate as a national problem.
Lander, can you angle your fly that way?
A problem the Busse brothers say is now part of their life's mission to solve.
It's completely possible. I mean, it can fully happen. I mean, we proved it.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.